feels unfamiliar. Neutrality. That neutrality is not indifference. It's alignment without strain. In quantum manifestation, the field does not respond to intention alone. It responds to orientation. Orientation is where your system is pointed when nothing is happening. When you are no longer oriented toward fixing the future stops resisting you. Most people think letting go means abandoning desire. In reality, it means abandoning resistance. Desire is not the problem. The problem is the internal friction created by trying to make desire arrive on a schedule that feels emotionally safe. When you let go, you are not saying, "I don't want this." You are saying, "I no longer need this to arrive in order to be whole." That distinction changes everything. From a neurological perspective, letting go corresponds to a downshift in the nervous system. Stress hormones decrease, attention widens, the body exits anticipation mode. And when anticipation ends, time collapses. Not metaphorically, physiologically. Time expands when the body is bracing. Time compresses when the body settles. This is why manifestation accelerates after people stop trying to manifest. The internal signal changes from almost to already, and the quantum field responds to that signal immediately because there is no contradiction left to resolve. The reason this feels like magic is because the mind never learned this order of operations. We were taught that effort comes first, results come later, peace comes last. Quantum reality works in reverse. Peace comes first, results follow. Effort becomes optional. This is also why authenticity suddenly matters more than technique. When you stop forcing yourself into a version you think you should be, coherence increases automatically. Being yourself is not a moral choice, it's a structural one. The more you pretend, the more fragmented your signal becomes. Fragmentation delays manifestation. Integration accelerates it. Be yourself and magic happens is not a slogan, it's physics. When identity is integrated, the field has a stable reference point. When identity is fractured, the field receives conflicting instructions. Letting go often feels like relief mixed with uncertainty. Relief because tension dissolves. Uncertainty because the mind no longer knows how to predict outcomes. That uncertainty is not danger, it's openness. And openness is the state where new realities enter. You don't need to understand this intellectually for it to work. The field doesn't respond to explanation, it responds to embodiment. And embodiment happens when you stop rehearsing who you'll be once life changes and start inhabiting who you are now. That's why you only find this when you're ready. Not because the universe hides information, but because information only integrates when the system no longer tries to use it as leverage. In the next part, we'll explore why letting go cannot be forced, how trying to surrender often recreates control, and what actually happens inside the quantum field the moment you stop gripping the outcome. Because manifestation doesn't begin when you decide to let go. It begins when there's nothing left to hold. Letting go doesn't happen because you decide it should. It happens when the system realizes there is nothing left to gain by holding on. And this is where most people misunderstand the process. They think they are attached to the outcome, but in reality, they are attached to the version of themselves who believes the outcome is required for safety. Safety is the real currency here. From a quantum perspective, the field does not respond to desire, it responds to stability. And stability is measured by how little your internal state fluctuates when nothing external changes. When your sense of self remains intact without reassurance, the signal you emit becomes coherent. This is why trying to let go rarely works. Trying implies there is still something to manage, something to control, something to get right. And control, even spiritual control, is still tension. True release happens when the nervous system no longer needs to brace. Neurologically, bracing is a prediction loop. The brain keeps scanning for what's next, what might go wrong, what needs to be adjusted. This loop keeps attention projected forward. And when attention is projected forward, the present moment is treated as incomplete. The quantum field mirrors that incompletion. When you let go authentically, prediction collapses, not because you suppress thought, but because thought loses urgency. The body stops asking the future to validate the present. And in that moment, time reorganizes. This is why manifestation feels faster after release. Not because anything new is added, but because something heavy is removed. Resistance is subtraction, not creation. Another important shift happens here. Effort loses its emotional charge. You may still take action, but action no longer feels like compensation. You're not acting to prove readiness or worthiness. You're acting because movement feels natural. Natural movement has no friction. This is also where people notice a change in how they relate to identity. When you're holding on, identity is conditional. I'll be myself when this works. When you let go, identity becomes unconditional. You stop postponing who you are, and when identity stops being postponed, the field receives a stable reference point. Quantum manifestation accelerates when identity and presence merge, when there is no gap between who you are now and who you think you'll become later. That gap is where time hides. Letting go closes the gap. This is why authenticity becomes non-negotiable at this stage. You can no longer maintain personas, strategies, or emotional performances without feeling the cost. Pretending fragments coherence. Being yourself consolidates it. And consolidation is what collapses probability. This also explains why people often feel more alone during this phase, not socially but internally. Old motivations no longer drive you. Old fears no longer scare you the same way. You're not detached, but you're no longer entangled. Entanglement requires tension. Release dissolves it. When entanglement dissolves, you stop pulling on reality, and when you stop pulling, reality stops pulling back. The interaction becomes smooth, almost invisible. This is the moment many people misinterpret as stagnation. They think nothing is happening because there is no emotional drama. But in reality, this is when the deepest reorganization occurs. Silence is not absence, it's integration. In the next part, we'll explore why being yourself is the most powerful manifestation state, how identity coherence outperforms any technique, and why magic appears only after you stop trying to manufacture it. Because manifestation doesn't reward effort. It rewards alignment that no longer needs effort at all. At a certain point, letting go stops being about release and starts being about permission. Permission to exist without editing yourself. Permission to move without justification. Permission to feel complete without an external milestone validating it. This is where the phrase, "be yourself and magic happens," stops sounding poetic and starts becoming practical. Being yourself is not a personality concept. It's a coherent state. Most people don't realize how much energy they spend maintaining versions of themselves that are slightly misaligned. They adjust their tone, their desires, their timing, even their dreams, based on what feels acceptable, safe, or strategic. Each adjustment seems small, but together they fragment the signal sent to the quantum field. Fragmented signals don't fail, they delay. Quantum manifestation responds to consistency of identity. When who you are changes depending on context, expectation, or outcome, the field receives mixed instructions. It doesn't know which version to reflect, so probability remains unstable. This is why authenticity accelerates manifestation faster than any technique. Authenticity removes internal negotiation. You are no longer checking whether it's okay to want what you want, to move when you move, or to pause when you pause. That internal permission consolidates identity, and consolidated identity collapses timelines. From a neurological perspective, being yourself reduces cognitive load. The brain no longer has to track performance, adjustment, or self-monitoring. Attention frees up. The nervous system relaxes, and when the nervous system relaxes, perception sharpens. Sharper perception means you notice alignment sooner. You recognize openings before they close. You respond instead of react. This responsiveness feels like luck from the outside, but internally it feels obvious. That's what people mean when they say magic happens. Not supernatural magic, structural alignment. Another subtle shift here is how you relate to effort. When you're not being yourself, effort feels necessary because you're constantly compensating. When you are yourself, effort becomes optional. Action arises organically instead of strategically. Organic action has no resistance. This is why people often experience sudden momentum after a period of deep release. They didn't do something new. They stopped doing something old. They stopped adjusting themselves to fit a future that hadn't arrived yet. That future collapses faster when you stop shaping yourself around it. This phase can feel destabilizing because old reference points disappear. You no longer define progress the way you used to. You're less motivated by urgency and more guided by clarity. That shift can feel quiet, even confusing, to a mind addicted to tension. But quiet does not mean empty. It means integrated. Integration is when all parts of you are finally pointing in the same direction, not toward a goal, but toward presence. And presence is where manifestation actually takes place. You may notice that you stop explaining yourself as much. You stop defending your timing. You stop overthinking how things will unfold, not because you don't care, but because explanation implies doubt. Certainty doesn't need narration. This is also where life starts to meet you with less friction. Conversations resolve themselves. Delays disappear without effort. Situations that once required strategy now respond to simple honesty. Honesty here doesn't mean oversharing. It means internal truth. The truth of who you are, unedited, is a stable frequency. And stable frequencies don't chase outcomes. They attract synchronization. In the next part, we'll explore why this state often feels invisible to others, why alignment doesn't announce itself, and how to remain grounded here without slipping back into old patterns of effort and self-correction. Because the real reason magic happens when you're yourself is that reality finally knows exactly who to respond to. One of the strangest parts of real alignment is that almost no one around you notices it at first. There is no external announcement, no visible milestone, no dramatic shift others can point to and say, "That's when everything changed." And that's precisely why it's real. True internal shifts are quiet because they don't seek validation. When you were manifesting from effort, part of you wanted to be seen trying. You wanted acknowledgement, confirmation, reassurance. Alignment removes that impulse. You stop looking outward for recognition because something inside you is already settled. This is where many people unconsciously sabotage themselves. The mind feels uncomfortable without feedback. It starts to wonder if something is wrong because nothing obvious is happening. And in that moment, the old habit tries to return, explaining, adjusting, proving, doing more. But nothing is wrong. You've simply stopped leaking energy. From a quantum perspective, visibility is not the same as effectiveness. The most powerful reorganizations happen below the surface, where probabilities are reshuffled before they ever appear as events. If you interrupt that process by demanding proof, you reintroduce interference. Interference doesn't stop manifestation. It delays integration. This is also why aligned people often feel temporarily disconnected from old conversations. Topics that once mattered no longer pull your attention. You're not disinterested. You're uninterested in noise. Your system is conserving coherence. Coherence thrives in simplicity. The ego, however, equates simplicity with stagnation. It wants movement, metrics, signals. It wants something to measure so it can feel useful. And when it can't measure alignment, it tries to replace it with effort. That's the moment to be careful. Not because effort is bad, but because effort born from discomfort reactivates waiting. Waiting pulls you back into the future. And the future is where alignment dissolves. Staying here requires something counterintuitive. Trust without anticipation. You don't trust that something will happen. You trust that you are already positioned correctly, regardless of timing. That trust stabilizes the nervous system. And when the nervous system is stable, perception remains clear. Clear perception is what allows you to respond when reality does move. This is another reason alignment feels invisible. You're not scanning for signs. You're not emotionally invested in timelines. So when opportunities appear, you meet them naturally, without adrenaline. From the outside, it looks effortless. From the inside, it feels obvious. This is also why comparison loses its grip at this stage. You stop measuring your progress against others because your reference point has shifted inward. External benchmarks feel irrelevant when internal coherence is intact. And internal coherence is what reality mirrors. You may notice that you no longer feel compelled to announce intentions or plans, not out of superstition, but because speaking prematurely creates friction. Language crystallizes ideas before they've fully integrated. Silence gives integration time to complete. Silence is not hiding, it's incubation. Another marker of this phase is emotional neutrality around outcomes. You still care, but you're not charged. You're not rehearsing disappointment or success. Both feel equally possible, and neither feels threatening. That neutrality collapses resistance. This is where manifestation stops feeling like something you do and starts feeling like something that happens around you. You're not pushing reality forward, you're allowing it to catch up. And it will, but only if you don't interrupt the process by needing proof too soon. If you feel that quiet sense of internal alignment, write "I'm coherent" in the comments, not to affirm, just to let your system register the state. In the next part, we'll explore how this alignment becomes your default, how to recognize the difference between genuine stillness and avoidance, and how to ground this state so it survives moments of stress, uncertainty, or external pressure. Because the real test of letting go is not how peaceful you feel when things are quiet, it's whether you stay aligned when life starts moving again. When life starts moving again, this is where alignment is truly tested. Not tested in the sense of punishment, but in the sense of integration. It's one thing to feel coherent in stillness. It's another to remain coherent when decisions appear, when momentum returns, when reality begins to respond. This is where many people confuse alignment with passivity. They think letting go means doing nothing, staying still, avoiding choice. But true letting go does not freeze life. It frees it. Movement resumes, just without friction. The difference is subtle but crucial. Before, movement came from tension. Now, movement comes from clarity. Clarity does not rush. Clarity does not hesitate. Clarity moves when movement is required. From a quantum perspective, this is when probabilities begin collapsing more frequently. Not because you are trying to collapse them, but because your internal state is no longer contradicting itself. There is no signal conflict. Reality doesn't need to check with you. It responds. This can feel almost surreal at first. Things line up without effort. Conversations go where they need to go. Opportunities present themselves without pressure. And because there's no emotional charge, you might even underestimate what's happening. That's normal. The mind is used to struggle being the indicator of progress. When struggle disappears, it wonders if something is missing. But nothing is missing. What's gone is resistance. This is also when self-trust becomes essential. You stop outsourcing decision-making to overthinking. You don't ask, "Is this aligned?" You feel it. Alignment is no longer a question. It's a sensation. And sensation is faster than thought. Neuroscience shows that regulated nervous systems make clearer decisions with less cognitive effort. When the body is calm, intuition sharpens. You sense timing instead of calculating it. That sensing is what keeps you in sync with unfolding reality. This is why aligned people often say they just knew when to move. They weren't psychic. They were coherent. Another important shift here is how you relate to mistakes. You stop fearing them. Not because you think you're perfect, but because mistakes no longer feel like identity threats. They're just information. Information doesn't destabilize alignment. Attachment does. When attachment dissolves, even missteps self-correct quickly. You don't spiral, you adjust. And adjustment is fast. This phase also requires honesty, especially with yourself. Not brutal honesty, but quiet truthfulness. You notice when something pulls you back into tension. You notice when you start waiting again, and instead of judging it, you soften. Softening restores coherence faster than control ever did. This is how alignment becomes sustainable, not through rigidity, but through responsiveness. You don't cling to the state. You return to it gently whenever you drift. Returning becomes easier each time because the nervous system recognizes the baseline. It remembers what safety feels like without resolution, and memory shapes behavior. Eventually, this way of being stops feeling special. It becomes normal. And that's the most important transition of all. When alignment feels normal, manifestation stops being episodic. It becomes continuous. Life doesn't feel like a series of attempts. It feels like a conversation you're finally fluent in. In the final part, we'll bring everything together and close this loop, grounding why you could only find this message once you were ready, and how to move forward without turning alignment into another thing you chase. Because the moment you try to hold on to this, you'll know exactly what to release again. At the end of all this, one realization quietly takes its place. Nothing about this was meant to be dramatic. Letting go was never a performance. It was a return. A return to a state where you no longer need reality to prove anything to you. You didn't arrive here because you searched harder or manifested better. You arrived because something inside you stopped reaching outward for confirmation. And the moment that happened, the universe no longer had to meet you halfway. You were already standing where response becomes possible. This is why alignment feels ordinary when it's real. There's no emotional spike, no spiritual high, just a steady sense that you're no longer ahead of your life or behind it. You're inside it. And when you're inside life, reality doesn't feel distant. It feels responsive. From a quantum perspective, this is coherence without interference. From a neurological perspective, it's a nervous system that no longer associates peace with future resolution. From a spiritual perspective, it's embodiment, living as wholeness instead of striving toward it. All three converge on the same point. Manifestation doesn't begin when you ask. It begins when there's nothing left to ask for. This is also why you don't need to rush forward from here. Rushing would reintroduce effort. Effort would reintroduce tension. And tension would pull you back into waiting. The speed you're looking for now doesn't come from movement. It comes from staying settled while movement happens around you. The universe doesn't reward urgency. It responds to stability. Stability doesn't mean nothing will challenge you. It means challenges won't destabilize your identity. You won't interpret pauses as rejection. You won't interpret redirections as failure. You'll see them for what they are, refinements within a system that's already in motion. This is what people mean when they say, magic happens when you're yourself. Magic isn't spectacle. It's synchronization. It's life finally knowing exactly how to meet you because you're no longer changing the signal mid-transmission. And this is why you could only find this message now. Not because the universe withheld it before, but because earlier versions of you would have tried to use it to optimize